is once again time for Husker Chat. It's brought to you by Acres Equipment. I'm Jason Jorgensen as we talk with Sean Callahan, the publisher of Husker Online, about Nebraska football. It's a matchup this week of a pair of 4-1 teams as Nebraska's on the road at Maryland. Sean, let's look back to last Saturday. Boy, that ended up being a wild game between the Huskers and Michigan State. Really a game in the game, but thankfully Nebraska pulled it out in the end.
Yeah, the win factored in that game a lot more than most probably want to admit or realize. All but 13 of the points scored came with the win behind you. And Nebraska jumped up 14-0 with the win with about 9 minutes remaining still in the first quarter. They didn't get the ball again with the wind until the fourth quarter, and they were trailing pretty much at that point. And then they kind of went on a run there. But it was a game, defined by a lot of mistakes in the second and third quarters with the offensive line, maybe the protections by the running backs or the quarterback holding the ball too long. It just, 25 plays, Jason, for 19 yards during that period before finally Dylan Raiola hit Ja'Cory Barney into the wind. That was the only pass of 10-plus yards down the field that Nebraska converted all day, was that throw from Raiola to Ja'Cory Barney, which went for 45 yards.
There's been a lot of talk about Nebraska not really being able to push the ball down the field so far this year. What's your take on that? Is there anything to it?
Well, against Michigan, they were about 8 to 9 yards per throw on the depth. Last week, they were 3.1 yards down the field. And I think the wind played a factor. I also think just how teams play Nebraska, how they blitz Nebraska. Like Matt Rule said, he goes, teams are either going to play us in quarters and kind of play a shell and force Dylan to throw everything short and underneath, or they're going to play us aggressively and force us to protect. And I felt like Michigan State did more of that. They didn't necessarily blitz a lot, but they were able to find ways to beat Nebraska, get Nebraska up front. And, the sack numbers really jump out considering it was only a 55 snap football game. They had five sacks. So 1 out of 11 plays, Dylan Raiola was sacked in that football game. And that should get your attention. But luckily for Nebraska, they made the plays that mattered and, won comfortably, if you're being real honest at the end. They should have won by 17, ended up being 11 points because of a late touchdown that Michigan State scored.
And we talked last week about the spread, and there it was. It was pretty close right there at the end with that cosmetic touchdown.
Yeah, that Michigan State did that into the wind too. I mean, that was probably the only successful drive either team had into the wind as far as throwing it and moving it down the field. And I thought Nebraska, though, Jason, they really got off after Aiden Childs. Dual threat quarterback that's hard to get pressure on. That jumped out to me, just their ability to pressure Childs. Williams Nwaneri led the country last week with 6 quarterback pressures on Pro Football Focus. He's playing at a high level. Deshaun McCullough, those 2 edge players, I think, have stepped up their game. And that was a big part of why the defense had the success they did.
All right. How about this week? Long trip to the East Coast to Maryland. The Terrapins were not very good a year ago, even though they had a lot of NFL talent this offseason. They talked about, getting back and being more of a team. And they've had a nice season, although they have to be in a foul mood after letting the Washington game get away from them.
Yeah, I believe they blew a 20-point lead, and Washington kind of came back. But for Nebraska, this is a unique trip. They've only played at Maryland one time besides this game in history of the Big Ten. They're going to leave on Thursday and just kind of get their bearings and have a night there Thursday night and then do a full day there Friday to practice and just kind of get right. And then, obviously play the game. I think they anticipated it was going to be an 11 a.m. game. Then it was a 2:30 game. So they kept the schedule they had in place. And that's a lot of teams are doing that in the Big Ten. But I do think this is a good matchup for Nebraska, Jason. Maryland does not run it well. Their highest output for a running back in a game this year, 62 yards. Malik Washington, their quarterback, is not a runner. Very big, though, 6'5", 230, has a huge arm on him as well. And he can get it down the field. Now, the other notable number for Maryland is they lead the country with 22 drop passes. So I do think there's some intangible things with Nebraska being the nation's best secondary, and they've struggled with mobile quarterbacks. Well, they're not going to see one this week. They've struggled at times maybe with some running back, tailback stuff. Well, Maryland's not been effective there either. So this does match up well, I think, with Nebraska's defensive strengths.
What do you think the Husker offense is going to run into on Saturday? What have the Terrapins been doing defensively this year?
So the Terrapins aren't a big blitz team. Their front four has been able to get most of the pressure on its own, and they beat guys straight up. So the early flow of this game, watching how the O-line matches up, their starting four has 58 pressures on the year in 5 weeks. So they are going to get after you with those four guys. And I think Nebraska has to neutralize that with a running game. They have to neutralize that with a screen game, just to kind of keep those guys honest. Because if you just have to drop back, they're going to have the advantage. And I think for Nebraska, you need to make them guess and think and find big plays. But there's no doubt this will be a great test for the offensive line going against a Maryland front four who's been very disruptive.
Also, this is kind of crazy to this point in the year, but this is really Nebraska's first true road game of the season.
Yeah, from Arrowhead Stadium to College Park, it's going to be a 43-day part in Lincoln. And yeah, Kansas City just felt like a home game in its own right, and it was a home game. There's probably more Nebraska fans in that stadium than you'd almost have a Memorial Stadium. And I mean, it was crazy how many Nebraska fans were out at Arrowhead that weekend. So it didn't feel like a road game by any means. And, Jason, this will have a lot of Nebraska fans there too. You'll get the Husker fans from DC and Virginia and Maryland and North Carolina, New York, Pennsylvania. They'll all be in Maryland. This is their home game for them. This is their trip from Lexington to Lincoln. They can make the drive and watch the Huskers 2, 3, 4 hours from their home. So don't be surprised if you see 10,000 Nebraska fans in that stadium on Saturday.
All right. Well, hopefully it all turns out well. Hope you have a safe trip, and we will talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
You bet. That was Sean Callahan, the publisher of Husker Online, joining us once again for Husker Chat, is brought to you every week by Acres Equipment. I'm Jason Jorgensen.